national question in Russia. This is from Marxism and the National Question by Stalin. I love a good AK. All right, 5, 6. This is part 7. The national question in Russia by Comrade Solon. It remained for us to struggle to suggest a positive solution of the national question. We take as our starting point that the question can be solved only in intimate connection with the present situation in Russia. Russia is in a transitional period when normal constitutional life has not yet been established. Russia is in a transitional period when normal constitutional life has not yet been established, and when the political crisis has not been settled. Days of storm and complications are ahead, and this gives rise to the movement, the present and the future movement, the aim of which is to achieve complete democratization. It is in connection with this movement that the national question must be examined. Thus, the complete democratization of the country is the basis and the condition for the solution of the national question. When seeking a solution to this question, we must take into account not only the situation at home, but also the situation abroad. Russia is situated between Europe and Asia, between Austria and China. The growth of democracy in Asia is inevitable. The growth of imperialism in Europe is not fortuitous. In Europe, capital is beginning to feel cramped. It is reaching out towards foreign countries in search of new markets, cheap labor, and new fields of investment. But this leads to external complications and to war. No one can assert that the Balkans War, this is reference to the First Balkan War, which broke out in October 1912 between Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Montenegro on the one hand, and Turkey on the other. No one can assert that the Balkan War is the end and not the beginning of the complications. It is quite possible, therefore, that a combination of internal and external conditions may arise in which one or another nationality in Russia may find it necessary to raise and settle the question of its independence. And of course, it is not for Marxists to create obstacles in such cases. But it follows that Russian Marxists cannot dispense with the right of nations to self-determination. Thus, the right of self-determination is an essential element in the solution of the national question. Further, what must be our attitude towards nations, which for one reason or another will prefer to remain within the framework of the whole? We have seen that cultural national autonomy is unsuitable. Firstly, it is artificial and impracticable, for it proposes artificially to draw into a single nation people whom the march of events, real events, is disuniting and dispersing to every corner of the country. Secondly, it stimulates nationalism because it leads to the viewpoint in favor of the demarcation of people according to national cure, the organization of nations, the preservation and cultivation of national peculiarities, all of which are entirely incompatible with social democracy. It is not fortuitous that the Moravian separatists of the Reichsrat, having severed themselves from the German Social Democratic deputies, have united with the Moravian bourgeois deputies to form a single, so to speak, Moravian Kolo. Nor is it fortuitous that the separatists of the Bund have gotten themselves involved in nationalism by acclaiming the Sabbath and Yiddish. There are no Bundist deputies yet in the Duma, but in the Bund area, there is clerically reactionary Jewish community in the controlling institutions of which the Bund is arranging. For a beginning, a get together of the Jewish workers and bourgeois. Such is the logic of cultural national autonomy. See the report of the 8th Conference on the Bund, the concluding part of the resolution on the community. Thus, national autonomy does not solve the problem. What then is the way out? The only correct solution is regional autonomy. Autonomy for such crystallized units as Poland, Lithuania, the Ukraine, the Caucasus, etc. The advantage of regional autonomy consists, first of all, in the fact that it does not deal with the friction benefit of territory, but with a definite population inhabiting a definite territory. Next, it does not divide people according to nations. It does not strengthen national barriers. On the contrary, it breaks down these barriers and unites the population in such a manner as to open the way for division of a different kind. Division according to classes. Finally, it makes it possible to utilize the natural wealth of a region to develop its productive forces in the best possible way, without awaiting the decisions of a common center. Functions which are not inherent features of cultural national autonomy. Because it's a part of, because the Ukraine, it was never meant to be like this independent, it was meant regional autonomy. As we saw, Stalin correctly analyzed that the forces for separatism in the Ukraine would most likely be reactionary, and indeed they were. The forces that were staying with part of the larger Russian people as part of the larger Russia, like that's the less reactionary version, which even since the separation, the illegal dissolution, I should say, of the USSR, even then you had like most people, especially in Russian speaking areas, but not exclusively, saw themselves as like the same people as those across the border in Russia as well, right? It's not a simple clean delineating line like fascists and ethno nationalists want to make it out to be. And that's kind of part of the point of why Ukraine separatism, in a sense, was always going to be like reactionary. And also why the reactionaries themselves, the imperialists, identified it as an important way to destroy socialism and destroy the USSR, which they did, which was, as we know, an enormous tragedy for humanity. Stalin continues. Of course, not one of the regions constitutes a compact, homogeneous nation, for each is interspersed with national minorities. Such are the Jews in Poland, the Lets in Lithuania, the Russians in the Caucasus, the Poles in the Ukraine, and so on. It may be feared, therefore, that the minorities will be oppressed by the national majorities. But there will be grounds for fear only if the older order continues to prevail in the country. Given the country complete democracy, and all grounds for fear will vanish. See, like I just said. It is proposed to bind the minorities into a single national union. But what the minorities want is not an artificial union, but real rights in the localities they inhabit. What can such a union give them without complete democratization? On the other hand, what need is there for a national union when there is complete democratization? What is that particularly what is it that particularly agitates a national minority? A minority is discontented not because there is no national union, but because it does not enjoy the right to use its native language. Permitted to use its native language, and discontent will pass of itself. A minority is discontent not because there is no artificial union, but because it does not possess its own schools. Give it its own schools, and all grounds for discontent will disappear. A minority is not discontented, not because there is no national union, but because it does not enjoy liberty of conscience, religious liberty, liberty of movement, etc. Give it these liberties, and it will cease to be discontented. Thus, equal rights of all nations in all forms, language, schools, etc., is an essential element in the solution of the national question. One which, as we know, is being crystallized still today in China. Consequently, a state law based on the complete democratization of the country is required, prohibiting all national privileges without exception and every kind of disability or restriction on the rights of national minorities. That and that alone is real and not a paper guarantee of the rights of a minority. One may or may not dispute the existence of a logical connection between organizational federalism and cultural national autonomy, but one cannot dispute the fact that the latter creates an atmosphere favorable unlimited federalism, developing into complete rupture, into separatism. If the Czechs in Austria and the Bundists in Russia began with autonomy, passed to federation, and ended in separatism, there can be no doubt that an important part in this was played by the nationalist atmosphere that is naturally generated by cultural national autonomy. It is not fortuitous that national autonomy and organizational federalism go hand in hand. It is quite understandable. Both demand demarcation according to nationalities. Both presume organization according to nationalities. The similarity is beyond question. The only difference is that one case, the population as a whole is divided, while the other, it is the social democratic workers who are divided. We know where the demarcation of workers according to nationalities leads to. The disintegration of a united workers' party, the splitting of trade unions, according to nationalities, aggravation of national friction, national strike breaking, complete demoralization within the ranks of social democracy. Such are the results of organizational federalism. This is eloquently borne out by the history of social democracy in Austria and the activities of the Bund in Russia. The only cure for this is organization on the basis of internationalism. To unite locally the workers of all nationalities of Russia into single, integral collective bodies. To unite these collective bodies into a single party. Such is the task. It goes without saying that a party structure of this kind does not preclude, but on the contrary, presumes wide autonomy for the regions within a single integral party. The experience of the Caucasus proves the expediency of this type of organization. If the Caucasians have succeeded in overcoming the national friction between the Armenian and Tatar workers, if they have succeeded in safeguarding the population against possibility of massacres and shootings affrays, if in Baku, that kaleidoscope of national groups, national conflicts are now no longer possible, and if it has been possible to draw the workers there into a single current of a powerful movement, then the international structure of the Caucasian social democracy was not the least factor in bringing this about. The type of organization influences not only practical work, it stamps an indelible impress on the whole mental life of the worker. The worker lives the life of his organization, which stimulates his intellectual growth and educates him. And thus, acting within his organization and continually meeting their comrades from other nationalities, and side by side with them, waging a common struggle under the leadership of a common collective body, he becomes deeply imbued with the ideas that workers are primarily members of one class family, members of the United Army of Socialism. And this cannot but have a tremendous educational value for large sections of the working class. Therefore, the international type of organization serves as a school of fraternal sentiments and is a tremendous agitational factor on behalf of internationalism. But this is not the case with an organization on the basis of nationalities. When the workers are organized according to nationality, they isolate themselves within their national shells. Fenced off from each other by organizational barriers, the stress is laid not on what is common to the workers, but on what distinguishes them from one another. In this type of organization, the worker is primarily a member of his nation, a Jew, a Pole, and so on. It is not surprising that national federalism in organization inculcates the workers a spirit of national seclusion. Therefore, the national type of organization is a school of national narrow-mindedness and stagnation. Thus, we are confronted by two fundamentally different types of organization: the type based on international solidarity and the type based on organizational demarcation of the workers according to nationalities. Attempts to reconcile these two types have so far been in vain. The compromised rulers of the Austrian Social Democratic Party drew up in Wimberg in 1897 were left hanging in the air. The Austrian party fell to pieces and dragged the trade unions with it. Compromise proved to be not only utopian, but harmful. Strasser is right when he says that, quote, separatism achieved its first triumph at the Wimberg Party Conference. See Der Abder and Die Nation, 1912. The same is true in Russia. The compromise with the federalism of the Bund, which took place at the Stockholm Congress, ended in a complete fiasco. The Bund violated the Stockholm Compromise. Ever since the Stockholm Congress, the Bund has been an obstacle in the way of a union of the workers locally in a single organization, which would include workers of all nationalities. And the Bund has ostensibly persisted in its separatist tactics, in spite of the fact that in 1907 and in 1908, Russian social democracy repeatedly demanded that unity should at last be established from below among the workers of all nationalities. See resolutions of the Fourth Conference of the RSDLP, held in November 5th to 12th, 1907, and of the 5th All Russians Conference of the RSDLP in December 21st to 27th, 1908. The Bund, which began with organizational national autonomy, in fact passed to federalism, only to end in complete rupture separatism. And by breaking with the Russian Social Democratic Party, it caused disharmony and disorganization in the ranks of the latter. Let us recall the Jagiellon affair, for instance. E.J. Jagiellon, a member of the Polish Socialist Party, PPS, was elected to the 4th State Duma for Warsaw as a result of a bloc formed by the Bund, the Polish Socialist Party, and the bourgeois nationalists against the Polish Social Democrats. By a vote of 7 Menshevik liquidators against the 6 Bolsheviks, the Social Democratic group in the Duma adopted a resolution that Jagiellon be accepted as a member of the group. The path of compromise must therefore be discarded as utopian and harmful. One thing or the other. Either the federalism of the Bund, in which case the Russian Social Democratic Party must reform itself on the basis of demarcation of workers according to nationalities, or an international type of organization, in which case the Bund must reform itself on a basis of territorial autonomy after the pattern of the Caucasian, Lettish, and Polish social democracies, and thus make possible the direct union of the Jewish workers with the workers of the other nationalities of Russia. There is no middle course. Principles triumph. They do not compromise. Thus, the principle of international solidarity of the workers is an essential element in the solution of the national question. Vienna, January 1913. First published in Proshevenie, numbers 3 and 5, March to May 1913. Signed, K. Stalin. And Proshevenie Enlightenment is a Bolshevik monthly published legally in St. Petersburg, the first issue appearing in December 1911. It was directed by Lenin through regular corresponding with the members of the editorial board in Russia. M.A. Savly, M.S. Olimsky, A.I. Elizarova. When J.V. Stalin was in Petersburg, he took an active part in the work on the journal. Proshevenie was closely connected with Pravda. In June 1914, on the eve of the First World War, it was suppressed by the government. One double number appeared in the autumn of 1917. And there you go.